What if your greatest strength wasn't your body, your money, or your name, but the quiet, unshakable power of your mind? Not the kind of power that shouts or demands, but the kind that simply is, calm, unmoved, and deeply unsettling to those who can't understand it. Friedrich Nietzsche once stood at the edge of human certainty and asked the kind of questions that make most people uncomfortable. He wasn't searching for answers that felt good. He was searching for what was real. And in that search, he uncovered a truth that few dare to face. The strongest mind is not the one that dominates, but the one that cannot be dominated. A mind that sees through illusion, that walks away from the crowd without bitterness, that holds its ground even when everything familiar begins to fall apart. This kind of mind doesn't seek attention. It disturbs because it reflects. It unsettles because it reveals. So the question is not, how do you become stronger than others? The question is, can you become strong enough to live without needing them? Let's begin, quietly, radically, from the inside out. If something inside you is listening, then let's continue. The higher we soar, the smaller we appear to those who cannot fly. Nietzsche. There comes a moment when you realize you're no longer walking in step with the crowd. The conversations begin to feel hollow, the laughter forced, and the praise that once gave you comfort now feels like a leash. Nietzsche never glorified loneliness, but he knew that solitude is where the soul begins to breathe. Not the kind of solitude that isolates you from love, but the kind that frees you from performing. We've been trained to be pleasing, to fit in. We wear masks we forgot we were wearing. But beneath all of that is someone quietly waiting to be seen. To stand alone is not to withdraw. It's to return to yourself. It's to know what you believe even when no one else understands. It's to walk away from noise, not out of pride, but out of peace. When you stop asking, do they approve? And start asking, is this true to me? That's where strength begins to take root. Quietly, steadily. Like a tree that doesn't beg for rain, it digs deeper. Yes, you may be misunderstood, you may even be mocked. But remember this, people fear what they can't control. And a person who stands alone, with clarity in their eyes and stillness in their soul, is the rarest kind of threat. So if the path feels empty, if the silence feels heavy, maybe it's not because you're lost. Maybe it's because you finally stopped following. To live is to suffer, to survive is to find some meaning in the suffering. Nietzsche. When you learn to stand alone, the silence reveals more than peace, it reveals pain. Old wounds resurface. Voices you buried long ago start to speak again. And for the first time, you hear them clearly. This is where most people turn back. They reach for distractions, for noise, for comfort, anything to avoid the weight of what's rising inside. But Nietzsche didn't teach us to escape suffering. He taught us to face it head-on, not with arrogance, but with depth, with the stillness of someone who no longer needs to be rescued. Pain in its rawest form is not your enemy. It's a message, a teacher, a threshold. What if this ache isn't here to break you, but to wake you? The Nietzschean mind doesn't seek to eliminate suffering, it seeks to understand it, to ask, what is this pain revealing about me? What is being called to the surface that I've long suppressed? Because the moment you stop running, the moment you allow the pain to burn through, something ancient begins to shift inside. You stop fearing the fall. You stop bargaining with life for ease. And instead you start to grow, not in spite of the suffering, but because of it. This isn't just resilience. This is transformation. A mind that bends becomes brittle, but a mind that leans into the flame, without flinching, without asking, why me? Without the crutch of false comfort, that mind becomes unshakable. It doesn't just survive suffering, it alchemizes it, and in doing so, it becomes something that no one, not life, not loss, not fear, can touch. So the next time you hurt, don't close the door. Sit with it, listen, because your suffering isn't proof that you're weak. It's proof that you're still alive and on the edge of something deeper. God is dead. Nietzsche. After you've learned to stand alone, after you've stared into your own suffering and refused to look away, what's left? The silence becomes deeper. The old truths, the ones you inherited, memorized, repeated, no longer fit. They begin to fall away like dead skin. Nietzsche's infamous words, "God is dead," were never meant to provoke for the sake of shock. They were a warning and an invitation. A signal that the scaffolding of ready-made meaning had collapsed. And now the question turns inward. If nothing is given, what will you create? Most people, when faced with this emptiness, panic. They grasp for new dogmas, new leaders, new systems to tell them how to live. But that reflex, to obey, is what keeps the soul asleep. A terrifying mind does not outsource meaning. It builds it from the ground up. This isn't rebellion for its own sake. It's authorship. It's the courage to say, "I will no longer live by a script I didn't write." It takes brutal honesty to admit which beliefs were never truly yours. It takes radical responsibility to stop blaming the world for what you've accepted without question. And it takes quiet strength to live by values no one handed you, but ones you forged in solitude, tested in pain, and claimed with full awareness. This is the moment your mind crosses a threshold. Not just strong, but sovereign. Not just free, but true. When you say, "This is what I believe, not because I was told, but because I looked into the void and chose it for myself." That's not arrogance, that's awakening. And once you awaken, there is no going back. The will to power, Nietzsche. Once you've shed borrowed values, once you've stood in the ashes of everything false, what remains is something deeper, not belief, not identity, but drive. Nietzsche called it the will to power, a force beneath the surface, ancient and quiet, not seeking to control others, but to surpass oneself. This will does not shout. It doesn't need approval. It moves like a current beneath your thoughts, steady, relentless, transformative. It asks, can you rise beyond who you were yesterday? Can you take your fear, your doubt, your failures, and build with them? The will to power is not about being aggressive. It's about being awake, alive to the fact that your life is raw material, and you are both sculptor and stone. When you live from this place, something shifts. You no longer wait for clarity, you create it. You stop reacting and start shaping. This kind of presence is unsettling, because it carries no desperation, no need to prove, just direction, just fire. People feel it, not in your words, but in your gaze, not in your strength, but in your stillness. Because it's not about dominating the world, it's about no longer being dominated by yourself. And that, quietly, is what makes you powerful. The individual has always had to struggle to keep from being overwhelmed by the tribe. Nietzsche. Once your will awakens, you begin to notice something unsettling. The more you come alive, the more the world grows uneasy around you. Society speaks of freedom, but it rewards obedience. It celebrates uniqueness, as long as it still fits the mold. The herd doesn't hate you for being wrong. It resents you for thinking without permission. To break from the herd is not an act of rebellion. It's an act of remembrance. You stop living as a reflection of other people's fears. You stop shrinking to fit within someone else's dream. But make no mistake, when you reject the comfort of the herd, you will feel the cold wind of disapproval. They'll call you arrogant, difficult, too intense. Not because you are, but because your clarity makes their compromise visible. And yet, this is the price of inner freedom. You will lose comfort, but gain consciousness. You will lose applause but hear your own voice, finally, clearly. So ask yourself, not once, but often, is this belief mine, or was it handed to me with a smile and a leash? Because until you're willing to be disliked for being honest, you'll keep being loved for staying small. And nothing cements mediocrity more than the need to belong. Man is something that shall be overcome. Nietzsche. This path leads to a threshold where old selves are no longer welcome, where comfort becomes poison and your former identity must be laid to rest. Nietzsche's highest vision wasn't of a god, but of a human who has risen beyond borrowed truths. The Übermensch, the overman, is not born. He is forged. To become him, you must be willing to destroy everything that is not truly you. Not just weakness, but illusion. Not just fear, but false virtue. You'll need to kill the part of you that still begs for validation, the part that whispers, "Will they accept me if I change?" And then, from what remains, you begin again. Not as a reaction, but as a creator. The Übermensch does not adapt to the world. He reshapes it, not through domination, but through vision. He lives by his own rhythm, his own code, his own becoming. He fears no criticism, because his compass is internal. He fears only stagnation, the slow death of living by repetition. This is the final stage of a terrifying mind, a presence so clear, so unshaken, that it exposes every compromise around it just by existing. So the question is not, how do I become like them? The question is, what must die in me so I can become myself? And if you're ready to burn, you're ready to rise. To build a mind so strong it terrifies others is not to shout but to see, not to control but to choose. It's to walk through fire without flinching, to stand alone without bitterness, to tear down the false self and rise, not harder but truer. This path is not paved with praise. It's carved in silence, sharpened in suffering, and lit by the quiet fire of inner vision. Most will not understand you. That's not a failure. It's proof you're walking your own path. Let others chase comfort. Let them cling to borrowed truths. You were made to become. And when the world asks, who do you think you are? Let your presence be the answer. Still, clear, unshakable. Because in a world that fears the awakened, your very existence is revolution. This space was made for minds that don't settle, for souls drawn to silence, depth, and inner power. If something within you stirred while watching, don't keep it buried. Like the video, subscribe to the channel, and share your voice in the comments. Your presence, your feedback helps shape content that speaks not to the surface, but to the soul. Let's build a community full of wisdom and peace together. I'll see you in the next one.